Till a few days ago, I was part of Mr. Nyatya's executive committee to organize this event, and we were discussing that its timing was perfect because it would happen just after the election, and then we'll go and find a minister to come and speak here. So I must confess, I never dreamt that I'd be the minister in question, but nevertheless, it's start with the topic changing world, changing India. I think the world is really today, it's always a changing world, okay? But the question is, the changes are very sharp, very discontinuous, very much more complex than they have been in the past. And if they've gone in directions which we have broadly and collectively not anticipated, then I think that those changes are much harder to adjust to and to predicate your businesses on. So today, if one looks at what those changes are, I mean, clearly, I think the most obvious one is that globalization is under stress. Many of the assumptions of globalization, which is global supply chains, mobility of talent, market access in different ways, I think all those are no longer assumptions we can make to the same degree with the same extent of confidence. I'm not saying that any of these are gone. I don't think we should over dramatize it, but I think we need to understand the seriousness of what those changes are. The second change, I would say, is across the world actually, and the reasons are very complex. Every society is different, every region is different. You've had actually, I would say broadly, a growth of nationalism. And that nationalism has been sort of validated electorally in many places. At one level each is different, but somewhere there is a message out there. The third change, I would say, which is actually a much longer term change, is sort of a global rebalancing. The sharpest sort of manifestation of that is the rise of China, to some extent the rise of India as well. But overall, if you look at it in a sort of, say, a 20-year time frame, it's very clear that the relative weights of global economies are changing, and the three are connected because in many, if you look, when I spoke about nationalism, the nationalism in Asia, for example, is a nationalism of confidence. These are of societies who are finding that year on year their prospects have improved. They feel that their views, their cultures, their concepts now need to get a fairer hearing than they did in the past. But there are nationalisms in other places which are actually nationalisms of insecurity, or nationalisms which are from a sense that there is stagnation, that there is quality of life hasn't improved. So the global balancing, in a sense, is driving the nationalism. The nationalism is driving the stress on globalization. So I would say the global picture, therefore, is very much more complicated than it was 5 years ago. I think for a foreign minister of any country, leave alone a big country, I think navigating the world is a much more complex exercise. To be very honest, I see that as a big challenge. Now, as for changing India, I think the short answer would be just look at the election results. People have analyzed what it's about, and it's very clear that a lot of the programs and efforts at giving hope, bringing change and giving hope to people at the lowest income level of this society has had a very profound impact. But at the same time, it's also, I think, if you look at younger demographics, you look at more aspirational expectations, I think those have also been met. So, I don't think there's a simple answer for the electoral verdict. But I think if there is one, if you ask me, so what was your big takeaway from the election? My takeaway would be that the 5 years of change, the 5 years of government actually has kept alive and perhaps even strengthened the expectation of change in this country.
So just to follow up on what you just said, clearly, as we've been discussing, the government, especially this government, this Prime Minister came back with a resounding majority. And so what role do you think that foreign policy, and especially foreign economic policy, played in that?
Let me look at the foreign policy briefly before I come to the economic policy. I think, again, my sense, you are free to differ if you wish. My sense is that the large majority of people in this country recognize that India's standing in the world has gone up, and more important, that this is something that matters to them. I think the assumption that somehow the masses don't care about what the world thinks about us is not true. So that sense that today, the sort of the countries on the move, that the world looks at us very differently, and there are consequences to that. That means different expectations, different responsibilities. I think that is something where foreign policy has made a difference, particularly in the last 5 years. The second, kind of related to that, is in the security sphere. Again, I think one of the takeaways would be that clearly the vote of confidence is also a vote of confidence in the ability to manage national security. And foreign policy is integral to that, because you have to, you are an enabler in many ways, you are an explainer in many ways of what has happened. But to come back to your key question, what does it mean in economic terms? I think today, the obvious one is, if we are looking at an ambitious scale of change, then the Indian model of growth, of development, is actually to grow with the world, and we need to forge different partnerships with different regions. These will be partnerships where it may be directly related to, say, a flagship campaign like Skill India or Namami Gange or something like that. Or it could be a larger, business collaboration, technology inflows, capital inflows, and bear in mind, today the Indian economy is not within India. A very large part of the Indian economy is also externalizing. So it would mean, fairer access to markets, negotiating conditions, better conditions for trade. So I think there is today, if we want to propel economic change, I think there is a greater sort of responsibility for Indian foreign policy today to focus on the external aspects of it, to create partnerships which would help within India, but also to create partnerships and, shall I say, arrangements, mechanisms which would help Indian businesses to secure markets and, do their businesses outside India as well. And somewhere I would say, there is a very strong interplay today between the economics and the politics. Certainly if you look at our region, there is a clear need for more regional economics, more regional connectivity. I think these are also areas where foreign policy can make a big difference.